Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Brian Burkhart of SquarePlanet Presentations and Strategy. Brian, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Gresh, it's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.
No problem. Super excited to have you on. And before we jumped in, I want to read a little bit more about Brian so you can hear about all the awesome things that he's doing. And Brian is the founder and CEO of SquarePlanet Presentations and Strategy, a Phoenix, Arizona-based business communications firm that landed a spot on the 2018 Inc. 5,000 list. Brian, are you ready to speak to the I Am CEO community?
Let's do it, Gresh. I'm in, man.
Let's make it happen. So to kick everything off, I wanted to rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on how you got started. Could you take us through your CEO story? We'll let you get started with your business.
I am getting old. That's part of the equation. And it all really goes back.
It always is, right?
We're always getting older. It's true. It really goes back, honestly, to my grade school time. I was in 5th grade at Oak Ridge Elementary School just outside of Chicago. I ran for student council president, and I was tiny, little guy. I remember making a speech in front of my entire school. I walked up to the lectern, grabbed the gooseneck mic, pulled it down as far as it could go, squeaks going through the whole auditorium, and I made a presentation, and I knew right then and there, Gresh, I knew that I was going to win the election. I did. But what was more important was the moment in time. It was the first time that really marked to me the power of effective communications. I was never a great athlete. I was never the smartest kid in class. I was never any of those things. But what I was by far the one most sort of inclined and then capable to communicate publicly. And that really was the thing that launched my entire career trajectory. And there are lots of serendipity and twists and turns and a circuitous route to where I landed today. But SquarePlanet's been with us now roughly a decade. I've been really fortunate to work with some incredible people and do amazing things along the way. But really, it's about helping people understand that to truly lead, you have to communicate effectively. That means when you speak, people both remember and act on the things you say. And that's an art and a science, and it's taken really a lifetime to get us to this point. But that's it in a nutshell.
Nice. I absolutely love that. And it's so funny because when I was around the same age, I started a family newspaper, and I'm really big into writing and creating content. And it's so funny how a lot of times we have those things that we are passionate about or things that come out in our childhood. And then we look, years and years later, and we're still kind of doing those things in alignment and kind of see how we kind of have our gifts that we kind of just progress with if we step into that.
I'll tell you a quick story. And I have to preface this by saying, I am terrible at organized religion. it's just not in the cards for me. I'm just bad at it. I suffer through and I need to do things, but it's not my jam, right? Mm-hmm. By far and away, my favorite song ever at all times of year is The Little Drummer Boy. And it's a Christmas song. And so if anyone has not celebrated Christmas, this may not make sense, but it's the song about the notion that when the King of Kings is born, there's this poor little boy who wants to give a gift. And he kind of looks within and realizes that he's got nothing. He's got nothing to give with one notable exception. He can play the drums. And the songs, the lyrics really are all about how this little guy, against all tangible odds, goes to the King of Kings, plays the drum, and the king is very pleased. That notion of giving your gifts and recognizing early the things that you can really do and leaning into it, I think that's actually the key to success for people. People are quick to deny their own intrinsic disposition towards the things that they love. It doesn't feel like work when you're collectively giving your gift on a regular basis. So for me, I love that you did that as a kid, and here you are today building content on a regular basis. I'm still communicating on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel hard when you're doing the thing you're naturally intended to do.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I appreciate you for breaking down that, because I think so many times we ignore or we forget that. But as you said, when we lean into those things that we like to do and often we're good at because that's why we like to do it, that's when phenomenal things happen. So I know one of those phenomenal things that you've been able to do is SquarePlanet. Could you take us through exactly what you're doing and how you serve the clients that you work with there?
Absolutely. It's an interesting little business. We have very few competitors. There are a couple. But it's an interesting business because it hits at something so deeply personal and often traumatic. At its core, what SquarePlanet is all about, it's this notion of making waves. We make waves. and I'm out here in the desert of Phoenix. There's no water. These are not of the aquatic variety. The waves that we make, it's about helping our clients elevate their most important messages so people remember and act. Elevate messages so people remember and act. And that can take the form of a variety of things. There are two main ways that we produce income. The first is produce events, meetings, that kind of stuff. So back pre-COVID, they were often live. Now they're virtual. But it's really about helping our organizations take those moments in time, whether it's an internal sales conference, a supplier conference, a client conference, and elevating them, and so that they're truly things that people remember and act on. Part of that is also helping the individual with things like a keynote, a presentation that deeply matters. And so that lives in a variety of ways. It could be, like I just said, in a conference sort of environment where someone stands on stage in front of a few hundred or few thousand people. It can also be things like a sales presentation. It could be one-to-one, could be a team-based sale, but those presentations that deeply matter, not the little key ones that we do 1,000 times a day, but those big ones, the ones that you can feel the butterflies, that's where we step in a really big way. Those are 2 of the 6 ways that we typically make money. I also get paid to go speak. We do some additional training and consulting on things like presentations. But essentially, it's helping people really take their message, elevate it, so that audiences remember and act.
Nice. I absolutely love that. And I think that being, memorable and being able to create that environment to make those waves and create
make those
waves.
You got to do it.
Exactly. It's huge. And I think that's what we all hope to do. Because I feel like, getting more into like the psychology of why we do what we do, I feel like it's so that we are remembered, so that we do create some type of action or make some imprint on our world or our society and so on and so forth. And I think so many times not being able to communicate effectively for that to happen can sometimes hold us back if we really have phenomenal things that we want to do. So I love how you're able to kind of facilitate that and help empower people in so many different ways with being able to do that.
Well, here's what I would tell you, Gresh, and it's very real. I mean this very sincerely, is that leadership and communications are deeply rooted. They're deeply connected. It's things like you think of any organization, big, small, doesn't matter. The leaders of that organization have no choice. They must communicate. Whether it's internally or externally, leaders are constantly put in a position to communicate. And within those same organizations, those that have a proclivity towards really solid communications often become the leaders. Mm-hmm. You see this relationship all the time, regardless of the kind of organization, that those that can truly stand out when it comes to communication will often rise to the top very, very quickly. That is rooted in leadership. And so when people can put these skills together and understand the power of that, they can really make a dent in their own little universal world, their life. I have seen many a person I've worked with rise up a corporate ladder, get raises and titles, and ultimately change the direction of their life and their family unit. It's real. So while it's a soft skill, it's one of those skills that permeates everything we do. And when people look at it with the right, proper lens and put the onus on it the way they should, it can ultimately change their life in a really profound and powerful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely, as you said, it might be considered a soft skill, but I definitely feel like it's kind of a glue skill, so to speak, too, because you use it in so many different aspects of, from a day-to-day basis, obviously jobs or presentations and so many different aspects. So I wanted to ask you now for what I call your secret sauce. And this could be for you personally or your business or a combination of both. But what do you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique?
Great question. There's a couple things I think. I think for me personally, which really my business is definitely a deep reflection of me as the founder, CEO. There's not much of a difference between getting me and getting my company. We are so aligned.
Symbiotic.
That's just kind of the way that is. There's 2 things that I think. One is you probably are familiar with, there's a variety of different tests out there, sort of like personality assessments. One, actually a great company, good friends of mine, it's Kolbe, which is with a K. And the Kolbe Index is this really kind of well-known personality assessment. And if anyone knows it, and I say these numbers, they're going to know what this means. But I'm a 4493. And that 9 is an indication of something called fast start. Well, Kathy Kolbe, the founder of the company and a pal of mine, she said to me after reading my results, she's like, Brian, you're like a 9.9. You're almost a 10. Doesn't really go that high. What that really means is that I am super fast on the uptake. Unlike most people, if you and I had a conversation, Gresh, and you were trying to tell me about your business or something, I'm going to understand really quickly. And that is a huge part of the secret sauce, because there's not a whole lot of people in my world that roll out of bed on any given day and say, you know what I want? I want to be beat up a little bit by some guy I hardly know about my presentation and communication skills. Mm-hmm. And so my ability to figure it out fast goes a really long way. I can give people really actionable feedback, really solid information to make them better in moments. And it's just one of those things that I just got lucky. That was just one of those things that kind of fell my way. I think additionally, I've been at it for so long that it's just so routine. It's so part of my world. The thing that people kind of comment to me all the time, part of the secret sauce, is they always say things like, you always have a story, you always have a little quip or a nugget. Well, I've had my radar on for those things since I was little. And so I have this kind of both physical, we actually have a very large database, but also a mental database of all these little bits. Because what I'm trying to constantly do, this is the secret to my world, is create parallel narratives. We've all heard the idea of storytelling, but that is an uncomfortable thing for lots of people, especially in a professional setting. It's not always once upon a time fairy tale kind of stuff. But if I say, let's talk about parallel narratives, a story, often a personal one, that will help the audience figure out what you mean without really talking about the thing at hand, create that parallel. If you can do that, you win. And so I'm always collecting, looking, listening, gathering data to create parallel narratives. So that radar and that speed put together, that's our secret.
Nice. I absolutely love that. And I'm glad you touched on, I don't necessarily think that it's luck as much as you said, you've been working on this since you gave that speech when you were 10 years old. And I think as you start to collect and continue to find your lane and really hone in on your lane and do that to an extremely high level, then you start to really become great. It becomes second nature. You reach that 9.9 as you kind of spoke to as well too. And a lot of it is being able to communicate, but not just communicate to be heard, but could communicate to connect with whoever you're trying to connect with. And those that parallel, that the exercise in doing that allows that to happen on a tremendous level.
Absolutely. I think a quick little notion that I love this, I tell this to people all the time. If you find the really successful people, and that doesn't have to necessarily be financially, by the way, there are plenty of people who are incredible masters that have created their gifts on the regular, and they're not necessarily rolling in dough. So it's not necessarily a money thing, but you find those that are incredibly good at what they do, the true masters, and you'll find that they've done the same thing 10,000 times. Mm-hmm. Then there are lots of people that do 10,000 things once. They're not masters. And so the notion is to really find your sweet spot and dive in. If you can really get into it and truly make something that becomes your masterpiece, man, oh man, you create a niche and you create something that people desire and want, and all of a sudden you've built a marketplace. So it's real. You just have to find that thing and truly kind of become obsessed around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And often, as I like to say, sometimes when you go back to your childhood, you can usually sometimes find what you really are passionate about and love to do it, not just for the acclaim that we sometimes get. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
I'll give you a couple. So right now, as we speak, we are using Zoom and all those platforms, whether it's WebEx, Teams, pick one. They create an immediate disconnect between you and I as people, right? It's not a normal situation. If you and I were across a table from each other or sitting in a room, coffee house, boardroom, whatever it was, we would look each other in the eye, no doubt about it. But the minute we get into Zoom, everything changes. So the hack that I am using is, you'll notice right now, Gresh, I'm looking you in the eye. But what I'm really doing is looking into the lens. Watch my eyes. I'm going to shift, and I'm going to now look at you. Do you see the difference? Mm-hmm. It's subtle, but it's real. I'm now looking at you, but I'm really not looking at you. This is looking you in the eye. So the hack is, I swear, I wish I could show you this. I have two little yellow Post-its with arrows. One on the left that says look, one on the right that says here. The thing is eyeline. It's a silly little thing. It costs nothing unless you need to go get some Post-its. It just simply makes me connect with you and whoever else is on the other end of that lens. That's a heck of a hack. The other one that I'll tell you, this is something that I feel like I've talked about this to anyone and everyone that'll listen. And that is the idea that you don't need to have a physical mentor. I think this is a really good thing for anyone at any time of life, at any age. There is so much collective wisdom available in the world, whether it's the internet, books, you name it. You do not need a human being at your side at the ready to be your mentor. I like to think of my mentors as an aggregate sum of the things that I read and experience. And the hack is to carve out time. If you look at my calendar is the thing that keeps me grounded and keeps my world rolling. And it has chunks of time for me to do things like watch TED Talks, read books. It's not an afterthought. It's not when I get in bed at night when I'm half dopey and get good 10 minutes before I fall asleep. No, it's in my active waking hours that I am collectively look for the world's wisdom. And it's not necessarily by a person sitting next to me. I think if you schedule it and make it something that's part of your habitual routine, you'll find yourself growing in your overall IQ, EQ, you name it. And it could be a heck of a substitute for a physical human mentor.
Absolutely. I love those hacks. And I love how you said looking for the world's wisdom as well, too, because I think you're absolutely right. When you have the opportunity to live in this world that we live in, where for a lot of us, everything's at our fingertips, as you mentioned, TED Talks or books or podcasts. And I, for one, have said a lot of the mentorship that I have has come through this blog, has become through this podcast, and it gives you that opportunity to really learn and to get so much better. And you're absolutely right when we're talking about communication and be able to create that connection. That Post-it note, I love that hack because of how simple it is to effectively create a stronger communication and relationship with whoever you're talking with. And I think those are two phenomenal hacks.
Well, that little Post-it note thing, it's simple, but it is not easy.
It
takes some doing. You got to practice. It's one of the things that people are, ooh, Brian, that's hard. I know. It seems so straightforward and simple, but it takes some doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, practice it makes perfect for everything if you keep on doing it with most things that we happen to find in life. So now I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO nugget. And this could be a word of wisdom or piece of advice, as you kind of spoke to. It could be something you would tell a client, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
This is a good one. You're not going to be surprised by this, Gresh. So this is what my book is about. This is what I talk about all the time. For me, the thing that I am most passionate about, and it really has started to resonate in a variety of ways in social and the fabric of life as we all know it, it's really being very, very clear, purposeful, and more than anything, in deep, true knowledge of oneself, of what you stand for, of what you believe in. There is enough work and enough people that you don't need to try to placate everyone. In fact, it's just a terrible idea. What's best is to know exactly what you stand for, what you believe in, and then work with those around you that believe the same thing. When you can find that congruence, man, your life is a million times better. I'll tell you, I don't mind being the guy that says this kind of thing. I've had multiple opportunities on things like podcasts to talk about stuff like the BLM movement. I've had opportunities to talk to people about things like wearing masks. And you can see immediately when you have an incongruence, it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't work. And there is no way to convince these people of an opposing viewpoint. I am not going to get people on board. When I was in Home Depot last weekend and yelled at people and said, it's not a chin strap, you have to cover your nose too, those people aren't going to believe me, right? They're not going to see it. When I defend the notion that Major League Baseball put the BLM logo on the pitcher's mound, when people say that's ridiculous, and I say every possible reason why not, they're not going to see my point of view. And so the point of the matter is if you know what you believe, if you know what you stand for, you're going to find the best clients, you're going to find the best employee base, you're going to find the best friends, you're going to find the best love relationships. But if you have no idea what it is you stand for, if you just go through life, you just get what you get. You get the life you deserve. So for me, knowing deeply what you believe and then screaming it from the rooftops, that's huge. The thing that's most interesting is the best brands know this. things like Nike, they have never once run away from the fight. They lead with things like Colin Kaepernick. Of course, that was the day that I went out and bought the biggest, brightest Nike t-shirt I could find and a pair of new shoes and walked around my neighborhood like, any questions? Because I believe what they believe. When you figure out what those brands understand and know and believe, you're galvanized to them and you shop them with frequency and you love those brands. I mean, things like Patagonia trying to save the planet. I mean, if you're all about driving a Hummer and burning fossil fuels, you're not going to Patagonia. Find those that believe what you believe. Find your core beliefs and everything comes together for you.
Nice. I absolutely love that. And I love the aspect of, making sure you do the work internally first. And I think we can be talking about individually, but definitely obviously talking from an organizational standpoint. And often when we're founder and CEOs, those go hand in hand, as you said, as well, too. So really doing that work in the beginning so that when those times come, when those questions come, or when you're faced with what might not be a controversial situation, you know where you stand. And I think so many times when you don't do that work in the very beginning, you sometimes waffle, you waver, you're not sure exactly what to say. And
That's
sometimes
exactly
you
right.
don't have that congruence with what you're saying.
That's exactly right. It's also a perfectly good spot for me to shamelessly plug my Amazon best-selling book, Stand for Something, The Power of Building. I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that. That's rude of me. Go to Amazon and check out my book, gang.
No, absolutely. I was just going to ask you that. So one of the things I wanted to ask before that is actually, what does being a CEO mean to you? We're hoping to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show, but what does being a CEO mean to you, Brian?
I think the number one thing for me about being a CEO, Gresh, is being truly accountable. When things go bad, I've got to stand there and say, it's my fault. The buck does stop here. And it's interesting because there's lots of little ways that those things can create a really great organization. I'll give you a silly example, but we talk about that kind of accountability on things like deadlines. If we have a deadline that our client is expecting something and we know we're not going to hit it, as opposed to waiting till we get to that deadline to tell them, we're going to find the earliest possible opportunity to say, hey, you know what? We're going to miss this. That accountability, that willingness to say, I have screwed up, I think that defines what the really good CEOs do. It permeates an entire organization. People realize that they're allowed to be human and make mistakes, but at the same time, figure out ways to fix those mistakes. That grace baked in from the top, that accountability through all parts of the organization, if that's not there, that void, I think, can be utterly destructive. And there are so many CEOs who love those layers of insulation and love to push that blame onto someone else. Not for me. And I think those that I've seen and worked with and those that I've spent time with that do such an amazing job of saying, it's right here, those are the best organizations. Those are the best CEOs. It's about, ultimately, it's about accountability.
Yeah, accountability. And as you said, being able to vocalize and say, hey, I made a mistake, but this is how we're going to correct it is a huge thing. And I think so many times you rarely get people that raise their hand and say, I did X, Y, and Z wrong and kind of take that true leadership mantle, as you said. So definitely appreciate that definition and that perspective. And I appreciate your time even more. And now I wanted to hear a little bit more on how we can get a copy of the book and find out about all the awesome things that you're working on.
You can certainly go to Amazon if you just put in Brian Burkhart Stand for Something. It's been pretty cool. That's been kind of a neat experience. It was August 1st, so I'm literally down to the day. I shouldn't state when we recorded this. I'm sorry. But
no, you're fine.
My book was released on August 1st of 2019, and so it has been a year. It's been very, very cool. But the best, easiest thing to do is also just go to SquarePlanet.com. Think round Earth. SquarePlanet is got a bunch of links. Our site has links to a variety of things, a bunch of free resources, some free tutorials, some free downloadable ebooks, and then, of course, a link to my book as well. But I'd love to meet any members of your audience and have a more in-depth conversation. Let's do that.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you, Brian, for obviously taking time out today, providing loads of value, and of course, being able to kind of create that opportunity for expertise, that gem that we can kind of learn from and be mentored by you and learn about all the awesome things that you're doing. So we will definitely have the links and information in the show notes so that everybody can follow up with you.
Cool.
But truly appreciate you, my friend, and I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
You know what? Same to you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience. More than anything, be healthy, and stay awesome. Thank you, Gresh. I really appreciate it.